episode of Houston Art Tribe. I am here with Joe Aker in his home studio and very happy to be here. And I know I say that every time, but I mean it. It's a thrill to be here for a lot of reasons, but we're here to basically to talk about what you do, and I think it might be good to just start with the fact that this is your studio home, but by the nature of what you do as a photographer, much of it is out in the world. And I remember seeing these, and I don't know if you're still doing this, but they were architectural photos. Yeah.
My primary work and what I've been doing for 40 years since I've been in Houston has been architectural photography, both interior and exterior.
Yeah.
And so it's always been out of the studio. I'm not a studio photographer that does food photography or anything like that.
Yeah.
What I primarily do is on location.
Yeah.
And have been all over the world, all over Europe, all over South America, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, and really all over the world, Moscow. And what it is primarily is photographing for developers. One of my big clients has been Heinz, who built the Galleria area and built buildings downtown. And then what I've done most of my life is shot photography that was personal work. But the personal work was always sort of stuck in a closet because I never thought anyone would be interested.
Yeah.
And then, and that's primarily what I'm doing today. I still do architectural work to pay the bills, but then I'm doing fine art photography and other media to, for my own personal enjoyment and creative being that I am. And I didn't start showing my photography fine art until 2007. And I had done some work that I had in the studio of my personal stuff, and a gallery owner, Deborah Colton, came in one day, and she said, "Whose is this?" And I said, "It's mine." And she says, "Well, do you have more?" And I said, "Yeah, lots of it." And she says, "Well, you have a show in 2 weeks, 2 months."
Oh, that's
2
fabulous.
months.
Yeah.
So she got me started in it, and I've had a couple of shows at her studio, and then I've had work out in California at Bergamot Station, and I've had work at 3 or 4 galleries here in Houston, and I now have work in the Museum of Fine Arts here, and a lot of private collections.
Yeah. You amaze me. You have sort of the best of both worlds in a sense that, and I'm sure it keeps you extremely busy. But I'm glad that you honored the artist in you to go out and make that happen. So,
yeah, it's really interesting. One of the things that's interesting is I wrote an autobiography as an 11-year-old kid.
Oh.
And it was a future autobiography.
Oh,
and
wow.
My mother kept it, thank God, and I found it. And it starts out, I meant hospital room, but I was born in a hospitality room. Then it went on to say that I wanted to be an artist, painter, and also be a minister, a Methodist minister.
Interesting.
And it ends with me being the first minister on Mars, married with twin girls. And so, it didn't quite come out the way I want, but I really wanted to be a painter, artist. Oh. And my dad sort of said, well, that's not a good business for a real man. So he discouraged me, and but the first time I picked up a camera, I knew that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a photographer.
Yeah.
And that was I've been doing it. I got my first job at 15.
Wow.
Professionally, and so I have been doing it professionally for almost 60 years.
That's amazing.
It is amazing to me that I could even make money with it, but. It really is about looking at and doing, walking into a job with my architectural photography. It's walking into a job and figuring out how I need to do it.
Yeah.
And I walk into some jobs, and the artist, the designer, interior designer, architect is explaining what's going on and what they want to show, and I say, "Oh, no problem," and I'm thinking, God damn, I don't know how I'm going to do this damn job. And so,
every time, probably.
every time.
Yeah, that's good. That's
good. Then I have to start that creative thing of figuring it out.
Yes.
And with my other work, I'm a very traditional photographer in a sense. Now I'm doing kind of experimental work now, but I'm really a firm believer in a picture's worth 1,000 words. Though I think today a lot of the contemporary photography has gone to you need 1,000 words to describe the picture. And
that leaves you hanging there, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And what I look at is, I look at some of the young photographers that have a story or have a line to what they're doing. And this is true in painting too, I think, to an extent. Any kind of art. But they put up this series of pictures, and then the curator or the artist has this 1,000 words to explain the spirituality and the creativity and and it boils down to sometimes just pure crap.
I agree. Oh gosh, no, I mean, not to be too harsh, but if you have to explain it that much, it is visual art.
Right.
I mean, the story should somewhat have the subject in there.
Right.
You should have something that makes sense.
I think it would be wonderful if on some of these shows, when people came in, they gave them a clipboard with a piece of paper and said, don't read anything, but tell us what the photographs meant to you.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, the viewer becomes the critic rather than someone who is trying to sell the work or someone who's trying to justify the show or whatever. And I think that you would find that a lot of times it doesn't convey the meaning. And I think that what art means is it means to convey a meaning and an emotion and a feeling.
Yeah.
To
I think
understand the contemporary ones.
It's a really good point. I heard Jerry Saltz say not too long ago that he went into a gallery, which he goes into many, and it was a photograph of clouds, and the agent in the gallery came up and told him that it was about this certain place, and I forget where where something happened, and those clouds were that, and he said, no, they're just clouds. At least have the story, have the subject matter, and it's like you said, they do these long explanations, and you're like, I don't want to read that. I want to be communicated to,
Yeah, there's a piece in my house that you said you really liked.
Yeah.
It's a nude man and 2 nude women.
Yeah.
And it's a painting 4 foot by 8 foot hanging over my TV. And the first time that my ex-business partner saw it, he said he was revolted by it.
Oh.
And I said, oh. And he wouldn't explain why.
Yeah.
I think one of them looks like his wife at the time. And
okay.
Anyway, but that's what art should speak.
Yeah.
I mean, it should speak some kind of emotion or some kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And some kind of,
yes.
that to let the viewer into what the photographer or the artist is thinking.
No, that's
and
true.
I think that, as Clint Wilhauer once said, if I never see another young teenage girl, pubescent girl in her bedroom alone, I will be happy.
I know.
And it's about creativity, and
you
look at some shows and you just wonder, or I'm amazed at how many different ways that artists do work that is never the same.
Yeah, and it's like they don't make it their own sometimes. It just becomes a repetition of something. I'm certainly not into just getting into criticizing how people are doing things. Sometimes I think we all get a little lost, and I'm amazed that you could balance that out, especially with photography, because photography can be so functional too, and you've managed to make that work, and that's huge. So I was just going to ask you about this. I mean, because you had a long-standing business, I believe, a great photo lab for years, Aker Imaging.
Right.
And was one of the reasons that you closed it because you're pursuing your finer art?
Yeah, I mean, I reached an age at 74 that I just didn't. I found myself so involved in managing the business and doing my architectural photography and managing, my 8 kids, employees, and so that it became that I didn't have any time for myself.
Yeah.
And I would reach an age that it was just too stressful.
Yeah.
And ours was the last lab in town that actually processed film.
Seriously.
And we had, when we quit that, we still get, a year and a half later, I still get 5 or 6 calls a day wanting us to process film.
Yeah.
But it was that whole idea of having something going a different direction in my creativity.
Yeah.
And it's been what I think one of the interesting things about it has been that transition from being busy 14 hours a day to doing my architectural photography only maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, and then having that free time and making that transition to doing creative work. And since then, I've done, Tammy Merrick and I did a piece in the George R. Brown.
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
And we're getting ready to hopefully collaborate on another piece. And what it is it's about, and I'm going to start at the Glassell and actually do a course in sculpture in January.
Oh,
sign up for it. I need to get off my tail and do it.
Yeah.
But and so to look at different areas where I can express my creative thing.
Yeah.
Now the one thing I do miss is I had a small gallery where we showed photography.
Oh yes, that was a great gallery. Yeah.
And I miss that,
Yeah.
the interaction with other photographers in that sense.
Yeah, that was a unique little space.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I think that we had some shows that were very cutting edge, and we had some shows that were very traditional.
Yeah.
And it was sort of a mix of work, and I
Yeah.
think that that's what was really important.
Speaking of installations, you've done some pretty impressive pieces, and I remember you even talking about when you were in the thought process of some of those. And so I haven't seen some of them physically, but I looked to see them, on the net, and some were at a couple of different schools.
I did a large installation for a new performing arts center at Sam Houston State University.
Oh yeah.
And it was a piece that was 8 feet by 28 feet, and it was metal panels, and that was one of the first pieces I really did in my current work that I've been doing.
Yeah.
And then I did 4 pieces that were 12 by 16 feet on metal panels at Lone Star College in the Woodlands. And
is that the one that is it's like a forest, or it's gorgeous?
It's a forest. It's there's 1 foot square pieces of metal, and there is, so it goes 12 by 16, whatever 12 by 16 is, that's how many panels. And it was, it was something that I came up with the idea, and then the others were sort of a copy of the idea that David Hockney had of taking 4 by 6 prints and then with a long lens and then putting them at different angles to make a composite. And I did the same thing with that.
Brilliant.
And one of the things that most people don't know is most people don't even know I do these, especially in the architectural field.
Yeah.
And so what I'm starting to do is get some publicity out about that.
Yeah, that's good, because you do it very well.
Thank you.
And you've probably helped others do it for ages. So
for years, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got the creative ability to do this so clearly. So
yeah. Photographers and artists have an opportunity to do things, students that they never thought possible.
Yeah.
And that they're also able to explore things like, everything from abusive homes to gender identity to, LGBTQ stuff like that. And I think it's important to push that because, one of the interesting things for the past 25 years, certain politicians have been trying to get rid of NPR and the National Endowment for the Arts.
Yes.
And one of the things, if you look back through history, one of the first things that, for instance, Hitler destroyed was art.
Oh, yeah.
In the degenerative art and he also started to destroy work that wasn't promoting what he thought was correct.
Gosh, that sounds so familiar.
And you look back through history. I was thinking this the other day at the museum when I was looking at the royal portraits of the Tudors, Windsors. Is that 500 years after Michelangelo and Da Vinci and Raphael, 99% of the people in the world that really look and know about art know them.
Yeah.
But they don't know who commissioned it. They don't know now some people do, the major writers of the period. Art's the only thing that comes through history and is shown on a regular basis that has survived. And some of it is political, some of it's not political, some of it's it's a mix. And I think that's what's important about today, going after art to talk about what is really going on in the world.
I so agree. I think many historians will say too, they often get more about a certain time period by looking at the art of that time period, because artists have always reflected. What I find interesting about photography is that everybody has a camera now. Not saying that they're all good at it, but we're really reflecting what's going on and who we are. And I'd say you're right. It needs to go more in that direction of.
Well, today they Time magazine presented as their Man of the Year all of the killed reporters and photographers.
Saw that, yes.
And news photographers.
That's.
And so what it is they're the ones that bring it home.
Yes.
And World War II was, to a certain extent, they photographed it. And the war exhibit that Ann Tucker and Will Michaels did at the Museum of Fine Arts was one of the greatest exhibits there ever was.
You missed that.
Yeah.
I missed that.
And but where Vietnam really brought home with photography what the power of photography was.
Totally.
Because it wasn't something that was 5,000 miles away. They brought it into the newsroom at 6 o'clock news, and Walter Cronkite showed pictures of the soldiers being killed and the rescues and everything like that.
Yes.
And I think that's part of what caused the whole revolution of the war marches and everything else, and brought really an end to the Vietnam War. And it's real interesting. And I mean, looking back on it, I was a news photographer at the time in Oklahoma City, and I was in the middle of one of the demonstrations at the University of Oklahoma, where the police came in and started beating on the students and everything else. And it was really interesting. So things that are going on with the Black Lives movements and the other movements today are not different.
No.
But it's just more publicity.
Yes.
It's getting the news out.
Yes.
And I think that is really good to maybe bring the world to a better place.
Totally. And that sort of puts that light on photography as a really important tool, not just for fine art, and those photos could be fine art anyway, but just also telling much more of a story and getting that out there. Wow.
Right.
Powerful.
And because today in the museums you'll find, for instance, one of the probably the iconic pictures of World War II was the raising of the flag at Iwo Jima. In the Vietnam War, it was the girl that was nude screaming that had been burned by napalm.
Oh, I know. Oh,
and
my God.
And then the shooting of the Vietnam guy by the colonel.
Yes.
Those are iconic images.
Yes, they are.
That carry the power of the visual media today.
Yes.
And in the past we didn't have that, but
No.
But the paintings, there are certain paintings that did. I mean,
Yes, true.
And especially the paintings right before World War II.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that Hitler tried to do away also with, and I'm not an art historian, so I may be wrong, but is that the collages that were done in some of the magazines before, in Hitler's time in Germany, were very powerful images that really carried the message of whatever it is.
Yeah.
And all of these images influenced me in my own photography.
I imagine.
And so, what it is to be the person that I am today.
Yes.
And, for instance, I went into Vietnam a war hawk and came out a dove. because I saw what war did to people.
Oh God, yes.
And that is something that has, that's where you started to look at the creative. I started to do creative things around, art and things like that.
Wow.
Life is how all of these events that have occurred have made me who I am today,
Absolutely.
in creativity.
Yeah.
And so, what it is it's how I look at the world and how I feel about the world and how I react and, things like that.
Yeah.
And, of course, a lot of my issues now are LGBTQ.
Yeah.
And so, that is really some of the work that is being done today in that area is absolutely wonderful with gender identity, and also just, the fact is that we are who we are, and you're not going to do anything about it.
No. And I love that some people have conveyed, how much we have in common, and how the human side of being different, or being seen as different, or judged as different. And that's so important in art, to communicate maybe something that might open somebody's eyes a little bit. And
Right.
I think it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, looking at for instance, Michelangelo, and what he conveyed in his art,
Yeah.
is very powerful.
Yeah.
And, it was an era when, he couldn't be the man, the gay man that he wanted to be.
Yeah.
But he showed it in different ways, how it happened
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
And I think that, the power of art,
Yes.
and I think that's why dictators and traitors and people like that, that's the first thing they want to destroy.
Between the writers and the visual artists, and you see that in history whenever you look at any kind of dictatorship.
Right.
It's really sad, but
No, but one of the reasons that I wanted to, sort of downsize, I would call it not retiring, I'll never retire,
no.
but is because to look at and to start to explore my own, where I want to be with my art.
Yeah.
And I think it's not something that, I can do in a day or 2 days or a month. It's something that is a continual process.
Totally.
It's like when I'm doing a piece of art, I start out with one thing and it ends up being totally different. And I think that's the
surprises you.
It surprises me.
And that is the process of creating, I think, at least from others I've talked to and for myself. You often are surprised with, what comes out of that, and it's like a healing thing.
Right.
I was speaking of, because just to get to one series that you did that I thought was difficult for you, because it was sort of a look at yourself. They were beautifully photographed, and talk about that and how
The nude self-portraits.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I was the fat kid, and my top weight was probably 350, and so I have real extreme body images, body dysphoria, I think they call it.
Yeah.
And so it's always I didn't like the beach because you had to put on a bathing suit and show off your body, and things like that, and even to if you have sex, turn out all the lights, type thing.
Oh.
And so it was a real challenge for me to do nude self-portraits, because what I had to do was get beyond what my mind told me about my body, and start to accept my body for what it was, period. And so it was going into the deepest, darkest recesses of my own fears in order to get over things. There's some acronyms for fear. One is fuck everything and run. And
that's great.
And the other is face it, really. What is it? Face everything and recover.
Yeah.
And so what I had to do was turn from running to facing.
Yeah.
And that is something that is very, very difficult when you have bad body image.
Yeah.
And so, I had to do that in order to start to accept where my body was, who I was, that I wasn't going to have a body like Tom Cruise, and so it was that whole thing of looking at who I really was and who I really wanted to be and everything like that.
And I can tell you as a viewer, what that did for me, seeing that, there's a few things, but one was the fact that you faced your fear was encouraging to me. The other is, it's amazing to me. There's very few people I talk to that don't have some body image issues, and it may, different extremes, but it made me think about my own, the way I view myself, because I could feel the pain in those. And I would also venture to say that it's like you, after doing that, do you feel like you sort of came out of that feeling a little better about who you are?
Of course.
That's just brilliant.
Yeah, that's why I did it.
Just because I think the heart of art is, of creating art even, is about going deep. It doesn't mean we all do, and I've had many things that I've done that I'm sure look pretty much just on the surface. But when I do that, and I don't worry about how it affects others, or I find that it might be more powerful. And it also, I think, I think it's important to think about how you're communicating something. So I guess, that if you plan to show it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even if you don't plan to show it.
Well, true.
Yeah. Because, the people that I have shown the nude portraits of myself to really like them.
Oh, yeah.
But, and then you have some people say, oh, they're just like so-and-sos. And, but it really is that they are different. They're quite different.
Yeah, they are.
And, I think that, like I said, I didn't do them for anybody else. I did them for myself.
No,
I didn't care.
That's
the only reason I did them. And a lot of my art is that way. I mean, the art that was first shown at Deborah Colton, that ended up in the Gertner Performing Arts Center in San Houston State, I did it for myself. Wasn't doing it to sell or anything. I just did it to.
And that's when the best stuff comes out, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm doing more and more stuff like that right now, and trying to figure out where I want to be. And I really would love. I love sculpture, and I think that's. I've taken one course, and I'd like to take another one.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing that. That's good.
Because
good thing.
And I may even go back and get an MFA in sculpture. Who knows?
I know, yeah. I love that. I mean, do you work with film photography? Or?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I don't.
Do you see that? I knew it was going away, but completely, or do you think?
I don't think it's going to go away completely. What will make it go away is they stop making the film and they stop making the chemicals.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what will make it go away.
Yeah.
But actually, the use of film, when I started my business, my lab, it was because I couldn't get good film developing. And we started developing film.
Okay.
And when I opened it to the public, people started coming. We did it just for myself. And then when the public started, friends of mine said, can we bring film over to be processed?
Oh.
We started it. At one time, we were starting at 7 o'clock in the morning and finishing at 10:30 at night.
Wow.
And it was continual all day. We had that much film coming in.
Wow, yeah.
And then about 2003, the digital cameras, 2004, the digital cameras started to come in. And so the film went down and slowly. And I actually closed it not because I needed to replace all the machinery, and it wasn't worthwhile money-wise based upon what we were doing. If I could have kept it going, it would have been fine.
Yeah.
But film, for certain people, have an allure to it, you know, and the old processes and stuff like that. And there's some beautiful and wonderful work being done.
Yeah.
But from my standpoint, digital is so much easier.
Okay.
And one of the things that I learned in school was that one of my professors thought it was real important to stress. It wasn't how you got there, The only important thing was what the final image was. 99% of the images created today will not be around 50 years from now.
Oh, really?
Think about it.
Yeah, because they're only...
You have them on a computer, the computer dies.
Yes.
You don't transfer them.
That's right. Oh,
You know,
yes, I've heard.
And everything like that. And for instance, too, what I illustrate is that the machinery changes.
Oh,
When did you play your
yes.
8-track tapes last?
Exactly, and it's changing so fast.
It's changing so fast, and DVDs are changing. There's going to
Yes.
be, they're talking now about using DNA as a storage media. And
just
what's
not-
wonderful today is with archival pigmented inks, our inkjet,
Yeah.
is they will last 500 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And
That's
now,
a huge-
and that's
huge
even
thing.
better than photography prints,
Yeah.
because they will degrade in 75 years.
Jeez, that's
The
amazing.
contemporary ones, the ones that they had a print at the Tudor exhibit that was faded, and it was a chromogenic print from the 1950s,
Oh, okay.
and they fade really bad.
Oh, yes.
And the only way you
Yeah.
can keep them from fading is freeze them
Oh my god.
in freezers, or keep them refrigerated.
Yeah.
So, but the whole idea is of art and how it's stored and everything else, and
Mm-hmm.
a painting, or sculpture, unless it's destroyed, is
Around for a while.
right.
I do have to say that I've seen this over and over again, and I was there Saturday also at the Museum of Fine Arts. I'm surprised we didn't run into you. But I looked at the Venezuela, show there, the modernism, and a lot of artists, even today, use materials not thinking about at all how they will last. And that even might be more common
Yeah.
today, I don't know.
I was photographing something for an artist here, for a collector here in Houston. We were going up the stairway, and there were these little square cubes that went all the way up the stairway.
Yeah.
And the maid said to me, he wasn't there, but the maid said to me, "Be careful, don't touch the cubes." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "They're sugar."
Sugar.
They were sugar cubes.
They were a sculpture.
They were a sculpture. And I'm sure they were at least $50,000.
Oh, good Lord!
But,
That's
how long
that's
will
it.
they last?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Side of creativity is we sometimes forget, or I sometimes forget, that art is a business.
Yeah, I guess it is. I've seen debate on that.
But unless you sell it,
Yeah,
you better have a second job.
yeah.
And-
and I've heard over and over again, it's like 1% of 1% of 1% of artists actually
Can make a living.
sell work at all. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
so it's like,
And
yeah.
and a lot of it is, I think in photography too, there's a phenomenon, I believe, and I've never heard anyone express it, is that sometimes curators and gallerists, and it gets back to, it doesn't matter how you did it, it's what it is,
yeah.
are more fascinated by how the photographer did it rather than what the final image is.
Yeah, and again, it gets back to that, who's going to know that by looking at it kind of
Right,
thing.
and it doesn't matter how you did it, whether it's
Yeah.
digital or film or whatever, used a special camera, is when you look at the image, is there an emotion that comes out of it for the viewer?
Yeah.
Well, I think it
You
comes
know.
back. I think it comes back to the fact is, and I've taught one class at college where I went, is that an artist comes in and shows a picture, and then he has this long explanation about it. And the question is to ask is this what you thought when you took the picture?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and because a painting also, any piece of art,
anything.
yeah.
applies to
And in
anything.
other words, if he wrote what he was wanting to achieve before he started on the piece, would it be different than if he did the piece
Good thing to say.
and then came up with an explanation for it afterwards?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was meaning to do. But that goes
And it
to
boils
the-
down to, usually with photographers, why did you take this? And they can have this long explanation, but it really comes down, at the time I liked it.
Yeah, and it does, and it's like also that same thing about surprise. You know, you said, well, I started in this direction thinking this, but then something else started to reveal itself. And I like that honesty about it. I mean, because that's, I think, a very real thing that many artists experience, you know. I actually wonder how many people fully, and when they engage in something, it ends up being exactly the way they thought it would be. But maybe they are out there. Yeah.
I mean, you know, and I would like to think they do, but
yeah, I do too.
You know, so and it showed the urinal.
Oh yeah.
By
Duchamp.
And that type of art, and people were just outraged.
That's right, because that was, even today it kind of outrages people sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
It really did change the whole game, that particular piece, even when he did that. But I love that.
Yeah, so you know, it changes constantly, and you never know when a piece is going to come forward that you know is.
That's true. That's true.
And I think sometimes the controversial pieces end up being the pieces that last the longest.
I think, you
know, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling was very controversial.
Oh, really?
They wanted to paint it over.
No.
Yeah, because
during that time.
Yeah, because there were nude figures, and they had another artist come in and actually put clothes on the figures.
No.
Oh yeah, and
I did not know this.
And then when he did the what is it, the Last Testament or whatever it is on the end, he used figures of people he didn't like as the people going into hell, or people he liked going into heaven, and they wanted to paint it over because the people, they were art patrons and high ups, and you brought it up a little bit in the nude self-portraits.
Yes.
And I think what art can be for people who are even not artists is that they can look at, it gives them an opportunity to look at their inner demons.
Oh, that's good.
And that by looking at their inner demons, then what they can do is they can free themselves to actually enjoy life more.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And you know, and it's really interesting. There was a Catholic priest named Pierre de Targigene, and he has a saying that a lot of people say that, but most people don't know where it came from. And I think that for the past probably 35 years, I've been really looking at this, and is to a certain extent, art is about spirituality, not religion, but spirituality.
Yeah, right. Totally.
And
agree.
what he said was, and I've always liked in this with this, is that are we human beings trying to have a spiritual experience, or are we spiritual beings trying to have a human experience?
I so think it's the second.
I do too.
Totally. We're the ghost in the machine.
Right. And I think that what we have to do is what art has to give to everyone is that ability to face their demons and to go back to that spiritual being. That's
beautiful. That's so perfect. And that makes me think that we all have that thing about creating. I think it's just part of the human experience. It may not be as obvious the way some people do it, you know, but because we think art, you know, but that creation thing, it's like you're co-creating with something, deeper.
Right.
Yeah.
And becoming in touch with your inner self.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
And if you know, one of the things about life is that fixing the outside of you doesn't fix the inside.
No.
But if you fix the inside, the outside will probably follow.
So true. That's beautiful, Joe.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much, Kay.
I want to thank you so much for letting me come here and talk to you and look at what you're doing and get your views on these things. Thank you very much. I'm going to be saying to the viewers, just thank you for watching, for liking, for subscribing, and we are signing out.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.